Hello, welcome to this music class. Today I want to talk about notes and the music stave. But as we are going to look at this, I would like to start with first of all what the stave or the staff is. Um, what we normally know about this is that there are normally three lines that we use to indicate, actually not three but five lines that we normally use when we are trying to put in those notes into the music staff, to trying to read. So those lines, they are always five. So those five lines, since they are parallel to each other, the five of them form up what we call a music staff or a stave. And so pitch is indicated by using certain kind of symbols called the notes, placed on a series of five lines called a staff. Now the first example you can see is this one. And as you can see, let me try to enlarge on it a little so that you can see. So we have these five lines: one, two, three, four, five. Now, those five lines normally in between them they have spaces: one, two, three, four. So these four spaces and the five lines is what we call a staff or a stave. Still the same example I was trying to show you can see. And whenever we are numbering them, in case they tell you maybe in the first line or the second stave, so we always start counting the lines from down. One, two, three, four, five. We don't start from up. One, two, no. We start from down, going upwards. So it always has to move in this format. That's how we always move. So now, the five lines of the staff, the four spaces in between the lines, the lower the note. Now, one thing we need to know that as the notes tend to be down here, even their pitch will sound low compared to when it is up. So for example, you can find maybe if you found a note when it is here, it is different from the way it would sound when it is here. So this would be like maybe do, do. So that kind of thing is what we are looking at. So those are pitches. So the higher you go is the more stronger or louder or sharp the note becomes as you go down. As you go up, I mean, when you go down, the deeper the notes become. Mm. Um, Perhaps having said that, the higher the note is physical representation of the staff, the higher the pitch of the note. That's what I was trying to say. Now, the lower the note is physical representation of the staff, the lower the pitch of the note. Now, a small emphasis about this is that let's just look at it maybe in the terms of maybe the pianoforte. Now, when you look at the music in this format, mm, most of the pieces you will always find it has something like a bracket here. It has something like a bracket this. So this kind of bracket is what we use for joining this and these two steps. Now the moment you find two steps combined like this, in most cases we tend to refer to them as piano forte. Now that is the combination that we tend to use. We call that bracket as a brace used. Now the right hand part is written on the upper step and the left hand part is written on the lower step. This writing is mostly in relation to the keyboard. Mm. When you look at the keyboard now, this one it represents your right hand, and this one tends to represent your left hand in the keyboard when you're playing the piano or the keyboard or any other musical instrument which needs two hands. Whatever name you call it, either piano or a keyboard. So that's one thing I need to talk about this. Um, Having said that, perhaps we can look at also the clefs. Now, a clef normally is a sign placed at the beginning of each stave. They show the names and pitch of the notes. There are three kinds of clefs. Mm. Now, at the beginning of the music, when you look at this line, always in this point, always at this point, at the very beginning point here, normally there's what we call a stave. Mm. What a clef. Now, a clef is what we use for representing music at this point here. Sorry for that. So the first clef that we need that we have to look at is the treble clef or the G clef. Now, this is a symbol placed at the beginning of the music note. It represents the highest pitched voice. The highest pitched voice is soprano. Just imagine someone singing those high notes and you're like, wow, what a blessing or what. So that is high pitched voice. Um, it represents the highest pitched voice. That's what I said. Another name for the treble clef is called a G clef. Now, why it is called a G clef is because around this area here, hmm, as we go down at a later time, you will realize that normally the note G, hmm, is normally found here. The G clef is found around this area. There is a line, the line of G in the stave is always found coiled here. So that's why we normally we call it the G clef because of that. Okay. Um, the other one is the bass clef. Now another reason that's why we tend to use where we apply this treble clef is normally when we are looking at the other notes of not the other notes but the other wind instruments, mostly like wind instruments or those high note instruments. We tend to use this. An example of such a scenario is normally the musical formats. For example, when you look at a flute, a recorder, a violin, okay? Those are some of the few examples of instruments that we tend to use this. They are mostly found on the orchestras. So we use this symbol of the treble clef or the G clef. The other one is called the bass clef or the F clef. Now, whereas this clef is much more attributed to the male voice, there are also other instruments that use it. Now, this clef is used to indicate the deep, low voice in the stave. So this is how it looks at. It looks like, and why we call it an F clef is because when you look at the, according to the stave, in any the line that will be passing in between it here, that line is normally called the F. In between these two dots, we call it as the line of F in music. So that line is why as to why we it is attributed to be called what the F clef. Hmm. Now, perhaps the last one. Okay, some of the instruments that we use this. An example of such an instrument is a cello. We also use double bass. We use those heavy instruments, say maybe even a trombone. Those ones that look heavy, and when you feel like someone is singing, you're wondering, whoa, that kind of thing. So we tend to use this instrument, that clef in the music. Then perhaps the last one, which is used, and that is the C clef. Now, the C clef is one musical symbol that is rarely used in voices. However, this use was much more common at a certain era, though even up to date, there are some composers who still use it. Currently, it is least used in musical notation, but if used, it may be common in classical music or orchestration. That's why they can be common. And sometimes we tend to use it to represent certain instruments. For example, an instrument of the treble of what of the alto voice, an instrument of the soprano of the tenor voice, and even at some point even instruments of the soprano voice. That is less least used. Now, um, it may be common in classical or that's how I will say. This clef has a movable C. Its middle C always its middle C always is a movable one. As the middle C moves from one stave line to another, it takes on different voices, and this is how it looks like. In most cases, this is how it looks like. So the area as which we know as the movable C is this point. Mm. So, assuming this was the musical instrument and it was placed around this area, assuming now this area, mm, assuming this area was placed was placed around here, hmm, in this line, that would become what we call as the bass. It would not bass, but this is more of the tenor, whereas the alto would appear in this line. That's where that coiling would come from. Whereas the soprano, if they were to indicate the soprano voice, you would find it here. But we shall not be dwelling on that as per now, but you'll discover it when time goes by. However, our major issue is about this. Now, in pianoforte, the treble clef and or the G clef is used on the upper stave, and then the bass or the F clef on the lower stave. Now, the C clef is used in music for some orchestral instruments and sometimes for alto and tenor voices. That's where they can be commonly used, more especially in the instrumental area than the voices. The stave with the treble clef is called the treble stave, whereas a stave with the bass clef is called a bass clef, a bass stave. Now, what I'm trying to mean is, assuming there was this stave, the whole of this stave did not have this symbol, it would just be there as a stave. But the moment we introduce this treble clef, already now this whole stave would be known as it would be called as the treble stave. Whereas if you introduce this symbol in it onto the stave, it will become now the bass stave. That's what we are trying to mean. Perhaps dwelling more about the pianoforte is that the pianoforte we should not only consider only like maybe to should only have the bass stave and the and the tenor stave, the soprano stave. What we may use is sometimes to may even have on the treble clefs. For example, you have like around 5 staves and you only having only each stave is only having a treble stave. Still, it qualifies to be a pianoforte because pianoforte, what we are looking at is just the joining of the re, the joining of those staves into one. So, having said that about the clefs, I believe this is where we need to end, and then perhaps we can learn more at a later time. In case you have any question, feel free to inbox me and I will respond to you.